I died on a Tuesday. The man who promised to love and protect me was the one who took my last breath. But what I found on the other side wasn't an end. It was the beginning of everything. Before all that, my life looked perfect from the outside. You've probably seen lives like it on social media. We had the nice house in the suburbs, the one with the white picket fence and rose bushes I was so proud of. He was handsome, successful, the man every woman supposedly wanted. I posted pictures of us smiling on vacation, holding hands at dinner. I was living the dream. But inside that house, I was living a nightmare. My world had shrunk to the size of his moods. I learned to measure my words, to make myself smaller, to become invisible just to keep the peace. Love, for me, wasn't a feeling of safety. It was a constant, buzzing anxiety, like walking a tightrope over a canyon. One wrong step, one word out of place, and I would fall. I remember the little things most. The way his jaw would tighten when I said the wrong thing, the sound of his keys hitting the bowl by the door, the heavy, angry thud telling me to just stay quiet for the rest of the night. I became an expert at reading the air, at disappearing into the wallpaper. I smiled for the neighbors. I lied to my family on the phone. Everything's great, I'd say, my voice a hollow echo of the person I used to be. I was a ghost in my own life, long before I actually died. But what happened on that final day was worse than anything I could have ever imagined. Before the end, my life ran on a schedule. Not my schedule. His. I was a graphic designer. I worked from home. It should have been a dream, right? Creative freedom, my own hours. But my office, with its big sunny window overlooking the garden I loved, felt more like a watchtower. My real job was listening. Listening for the sound of his car in the driveway, for the tone of his voice when he called, for the way he shut a door. Each sound was a weather report for the storm that might be coming. I used to be so loud. Not in a bad way. I just took up space. I laughed from my belly. I had opinions. I dreamed of starting my own agency. I was the one who saw him across the room at a friend's party and thought, that's the one. Here's something no one knows, not even my own mother. I was the one who proposed to him, on a beach at sunset, just like in the movies. I thought I was writing our fairy tale. I had no idea I was casting him as the villain. My world became a series of small, calculated movements. I'd make his coffee exactly how he liked it. Not a drop more milk, not a grain less sugar. I'd lay out his clothes for work, making sure his favorite tie was clean. These weren't acts of love. They were survival tactics. They were bargains I made with the universe, little rituals to keep the monster asleep. I remember one afternoon my sister called, so excited about a promotion she'd gotten. I could hear the joy in her voice, and it felt like a foreign language. I told her I was proud, that everything here was perfect. But as I spoke, I was watching him through the doorway, his back to me, and I saw his shoulders tense up. Just that tiny movement told me I was being too loud, too happy. I cut the call short. My sister's joy was a threat in my own home. But the emptiness, that was the worst part. It was a cold, hollow space in my chest that just grew bigger every day. I'd look in the mirror while brushing my teeth and I wouldn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were dull. Her smile was a mask that didn't quite fit. Who was she? Where did the girl who proposed on a beach go? I had poured so much of myself into him, into trying to fix him, into trying to earn his love, that there was nothing left of me. I was a beautiful, empty house. Everything looked perfect on the outside, but on the inside there was just silence. I kept telling myself it was a phase, that the man I fell in love with was still in there somewhere. But then came the night of his company's awards dinner, and I saw a look in his eyes I'd never seen before. A look of pure possession. And what happened after we got home that night was the beginning of the end. I thought I had already seen the worst of him. I was so wrong. Have you ever felt like you were disappearing right in front of your own eyes? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the story of what happened that night is one you won't want to miss. I'll be sharing more stories like this, stories of finding light in the deepest darkness. That awards dinner was supposed to be his big night. He wore his best suit, the charcoal one that made his shoulders look broader. To everyone else, we were the perfect couple. He was the rising star, and I was the adoring wife, smiling on his arm. I remember the clinking of glasses, the hum of polite conversation, the flash of cameras. I played my part so well I almost believed it myself. I smiled until my cheeks ached, laughed at all the right jokes, and told everyone how proud I was. But underneath the silk of my dress, my skin was crawling. There was a strange energy in the air, a low hum of electricity right before a storm. The first real sign came from an unexpected place. His boss's wife, a kind, older woman named Carol, pulled me aside by the dessert table. She put her hand on my arm, her touch surprisingly firm. Her eyes, full of a sad, knowing look, met mine. "You are so much stronger than you think," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. Then she squeezed my arm and walked away before I could even respond. I just stood there, confused. It wasn't a compliment. It felt like a warning. I looked across the room and saw him watching us. His smile never wavered, but a shadow passed over his face, a flicker of something cold and hard. He knew she'd said something to me, and he didn't like it. Then came the award. Salesman of the Year. The whole room erupted in applause. I stood up, my own applause lost in the noise, a perfect practiced smile on my face. He walked onto the stage, a picture of confidence, and took the glass trophy. He thanked his colleagues, his mentors, his boss, and then he looked right at me. He raised the trophy a little, and the spotlight caught the glass, making it gleam. But the look in his eyes, it wasn't love. It wasn't gratitude. It was possession, pure and simple, the same way a man might look at a new car or an expensive watch. In that moment, I wasn't his partner. I was his prize. The beautiful, silent accessory that proved his success to the world. The room felt suddenly cold. The car ride home was the longest 10 minutes of my life. The silence was a physical thing, pressing in on me from all sides. He gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were white. I stared out the passenger window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of color, praying he would just start yelling. The yelling I could handle. I knew how to navigate the yelling. But this silence, this was different. This was the quiet of a hunter stalking its prey. I could feel his rage filling up the small space of the car, choking the very air I was trying to breathe. But what happened next was even worse. As we pulled into our dark driveway, the headlights swept across the garage door, and I remembered the one secret I was keeping. A few days before, I'd gotten a job offer. A real job, at a design firm downtown. A way out. My own money. My own life. I hadn't told him yet. I was trying to find the right time, the right way. I glanced down at the floor of the car and my heart stopped. My portfolio case was there, and a corner of the acceptance letter was sticking out. And I knew in that instant that he had seen it. The silence wasn't about the dinner, or Carol. It was about my escape plan. He turned off the engine, and the world went completely black and silent. He didn't move. He just sat there, breathing slowly, deliberately. Then he turned his head and looked at me. The man I married wasn't there anymore. The charming face from the party was gone. All that was left was a terrifying emptiness in his eyes. He finally broke the silence, but his voice was eerily calm, almost gentle, and what he said chilled me to my very soul. Have you ever ignored your own intuition? That little voice telling you to run? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the story of what happened when we walked into that house is something you need to hear. I'll be sharing more stories about finding the strength you never knew you had. He leaned in, and the smell of expensive cologne and something bitter filled the car. I've given you everything, he whispered, his voice so low it was almost a caress. A beautiful home. A perfect life. And you thought you could just throw it all away? The words weren't angry. They were worse. They were hollow, devoid of any emotion at all. It was the voice of a man who had already made a decision. He got out of the car, and I watched him, frozen. My hand was on the door handle, my brain screaming at me to run. Just open the door and run. But where would I go? My feet felt like they were bolted to the floor. He walked around and opened my door, offering his hand like a perfect gentleman. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever done. I took his hand. My own was trembling, cold as ice. His was warm and steady. The walk to our front door felt like a mile. Each step was a drumbeat counting down to something awful. He unlocked the door and held it open for me. I stepped inside, into the familiar darkness of our foyer. The air was thick and still. He closed the door behind me, and the sound of the deadbolt clicking into place was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a cage door locking. He didn't turn on the main lights, just a small lamp on the entryway table. It cast long, monstrous shadows that danced on the walls, turning our beautiful home into a haunted house. He walked past me into the living room, his back straight, his movements calm and deliberate. He placed his glass trophy on the mantelpiece, right in the center. Then he turned to face me. He didn't have to raise his voice. He didn't have to move. The rage was pouring off him in waves, a physical heat that made the room feel small and airless. "The job," he said, his voice flat. "Tell me about the job." He knew. Of course he knew. He had seen the letter. My one little secret, my tiny seed of hope, had been discovered. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. My throat was tight. My mouth was dry. I just stood there, a statue in the half-light. He took a step towards me, then another. "You think you can just leave?" he said, his voice starting to crack with a rage he could no longer contain. "After everything I've done for you? Everything I've given you? You are nothing without me." He was shouting now, his face twisting into a mask of pure fury I had only seen glimpses of before. He grabbed my portfolio from the floor where I'd dropped it and ripped the letter out, waving it in my face. "This! You think this makes you someone?" I finally found my voice, a pathetic little whisper. "Please, just let me go." That was the wrong thing to say. His eyes went black. It happened so fast. He lunged, not at me, but at the portfolio. He tore it from my hands, and in the motion, he shoved me. It wasn't a hard shove, but I was off balance. I stumbled backward, my arms flailing, and my head hit the sharp corner of our heavy oak coffee table. A blinding flash of white-hot pain exploded behind my eyes, and the world tilted sideways. I fell to the floor, the thick rug doing little to cushion the impact. I lay there, dazed, a strange warmth spreading from the back of my head. The shouting had stopped. I could hear a ringing in my ears, and the room was blurry, swimming in and out of focus. I saw him standing over me, the torn letter still clutched in his hand. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes, a flash of the man I married, but it was gone as quickly as it came. He knelt down beside me. I thought he was going to help me. I thought he was going to say he was sorry. But his face was blank, his eyes like polished stones. His hands came towards my neck. They were so gentle at first. I didn't even understand what was happening. My last thought wasn't of anger or hate. It was strangely simple. The roses. I never got to see the roses bloom this year. I thought of my sister's laugh, a sound I hadn't truly heard in years. And then the pressure started. The world began to shrink, the edges of my vision turning dark, tunneling into a single point of light. The last thing I saw was his face, completely calm, as he took the very last breath from my body. And then, the pain was gone. The fear was gone. The world just faded, and I was floating. Have you ever had a moment where you knew your life was about to change forever? Tell me about it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what happened after I took my last breath is the most important part of my story, and it might just change the way you see yours. There was no tunnel of light, not at first. There was just a release. It felt like a string, pulled taut my entire life, had finally been cut. The pain vanished. The fear dissolved. All the weight I had carried, the constant anxiety, the heaviness in my chest, it all just lifted away. I was floating. Not in water, not in air. I was floating in a gentle, quiet nothingness. For the first time in so long, I felt peaceful. Then, my focus shifted. I was looking down. I could see our living room, just as I'd left it, the overturned lamp, the shattered picture frame on the floor, and I could see me. My body was lying on the rug, so still. My hair was fanned out around my head and my eyes were open, but they weren't seeing anything. And he was there, kneeling beside me, his hands still near my neck. But the strangest thing happened. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hate. Looking at him, this man who had just taken my life, all I felt was a deep, hollow sadness. He looked so small, so broken. That was the first secret the other side gave me. My monster was just a scared little boy, terrified of being left alone. But the scene began to blur, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. The edges of the room dissolved, the colors bled into each other, and everything faded into a soft, warm gray. I felt a gentle pull, like a tide drawing me out to sea. I wasn't scared. How could I be? The feeling that surrounded me was a love I had never known. It wasn't the jealous, possessive thing I had mistaken for love back on Earth. This was different. It was vast and unconditional. It was like breathing for the first time after a lifetime of holding my breath. The gray mist started to sparkle with tiny flecks of gold light, like dust motes dancing in a sunbeam. They swirled around me, through me, and each one that touched me felt like a happy memory I'd forgotten I had. The smell of my grandmother's kitchen, the feeling of grass between my toes as a child, my sister's laughter. It wasn't a movie of my life. It was the feeling of my life, stripped of all the pain. It was just the good parts, the pure parts. And I realized that this was who I really was. The woman on the floor, the victim. That was just a costume I had been forced to wear. And then I felt a presence. It wasn't a person, not a shape or a voice. It was a knowing, a warmth that filled every inch of my being. It was a love so powerful, so absolute. It felt like the sun rising inside my soul. In that light, I understood everything. I understood that my worth was never tied to him, that I was never broken, that I was loved completely, just as I was. All the years I had spent trying to earn his love felt like a waste, because this incredible, perfect love had been waiting for me all along. It was a love that didn't need to be earned. It was just given. But as this peace washed over me, a new question began to form. Not in words, but in a feeling. If this was home, why did I get the sense I wasn't staying? Have you ever felt a moment of pure clarity that changed how you saw everything? I want to hear about it in the comments. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because you need to hear the message that Presence gave me, and why I was sent back. I'll be sharing more stories about finding the light, even when you're surrounded by darkness. That question hung in the silence, not as a thought, but as a feeling. And the universe answered. The soft gray mist around me began to glow, shifting from silver to a warm, impossible gold. It wasn't light as I knew it. It was a light you could feel, a warmth that was more than just temperature. It was acceptance. It was a sound, too, but one I felt in the very essence of my being. A low, perfect hum, like the universe was breathing in harmony. I was inside the breath, and then I felt it. The presence. It wasn't a figure or a shape. It was everything. It was the light, the sound, the warmth, all focused into a single point of consciousness that was everywhere at once. And it knew me. It knew every secret I'd ever kept, every tear I'd ever cried, every tiny hope I'd ever had. And it loved me. Not in the broken, conditional way I had known. This was a love so vast, so powerful. It didn't just surround me. It was me. It was like I had spent my whole life being a single thirsty drop of water, and I had finally fallen back into the ocean. In that light, my life was laid out before me, not like a movie, but like a tapestry. I saw the threads of pain, dark and knotted, but for the first time, I saw the threads of gold woven through them. I saw the night my sister and I stayed up talking until dawn, a thread of pure connection. I saw the moment I first held a paintbrush as a child, a thread of bright, creative joy. I even saw him, my husband, and the thread of his own pain, a tangled black knot that had nothing to do with me. I understood in that instant that his darkness was never a reflection of my worth. It was just his own empty space that he tried to fill with my light. There were no words. Communication was instant, a pure transfer of knowing. The presence washed a single thought over me, a truth that settled into the core of my soul. You were never the one who needed to be fixed. It was the most profound revelation. All those years I had spent trying to be better, quieter, more perfect for him, they were all based on a lie. I was already whole. I had always been whole. The love I was searching for from him was just a dim echo of this incredible love that had been mine all along. Then, I felt a boundary. It wasn't a wall or a gate. It was like a shimmering curtain of light, a place where the golden peace became even more intense, more absolute. I understood that beyond it was forever, an eternity of this perfect peace, but the presence gave me a different understanding, a new path. Your story isn't over. The feeling came, clear as a bell. The deepest wounds create the brightest lights for others. Your pain has a purpose. It's time to go back and be a light. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, a mission. The choice was mine. I could step through that curtain and leave all the pain of the world behind. Or I could go back, into the cold, broken world, and carry this light with me. I thought of my sister. I thought of Carol, the woman at the dinner party with the warning in her eyes. I thought of all the other women living in silent houses, walking on eggshells, believing the lie that they weren't enough. And for the first time, I felt a strength that had nothing to do with survival. It was the strength of purpose. I chose to go back. The golden ocean began to recede. The perfect hum faded, and I felt myself being pulled, gently but firmly, back towards a distant, painful pinprick of light. Back to the world. Have you ever had a moment that gave your life a completely new meaning? Let me know your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you won't believe what happened when I woke up in the hospital and who was sitting by my bed. I'll be sharing more stories about how our deepest scars can become our greatest strengths. Before me, the golden light grew even brighter, forming a sort of shimmering curtain. It wasn't a wall, but a doorway. I knew with a certainty that went deeper than thought, that on the other side of that curtain was home, forever. A place where pain couldn't exist, where I would be held in that perfect, unconditional love for eternity. The temptation to step through was overwhelming. It was everything I had ever wanted, to just let go, to be free, to finally rest. But as I felt myself drawn toward it, another feeling rose up inside me, a question that wasn't mine, but was placed in my heart. Is this the end of your story? And then the presence gave me the answer. There were no words, just a wave of pure understanding that washed over me. Your life was not a mistake. Your pain was not a punishment. It was a fire, and you have walked through it. I felt a new message settle into my soul, a truth so clear and powerful it became a part of me. It is not your time. There are others still in the fire who think they are alone. Your story is their light. Go back. Be the light. It wasn't a command. It was a choice, a mission, offered with that same infinite love. I could have said no. I could have stepped through that curtain of light and left the broken world behind forever. And for a second, I almost did. But then I saw faces in my mind. I saw my sister, who would never know the truth. I saw Carol, the woman at the dinner, with that sad, knowing look in her eyes. And I saw other faces, women I'd never met, with the same hollow look in their eyes that I used to see in the mirror. Women who were praying for a sign, for a reason to keep going. I realized my story didn't belong to me anymore. My pain could be someone else's survival guide. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt a strength that had nothing to do with him. It was all mine. I made my choice. I turned away from the light. The instant I chose to return, the feeling of the golden ocean began to recede. The perfect hum faded, and I felt a gentle but firm pull, like an invisible string tugging me backward, away from the peace. The warmth started to drain away, replaced by a distant, creeping cold. The light began to shrink, collapsing back into a single, painful pinprick. It felt like I was falling, tumbling backward through a long, dark tunnel, leaving heaven behind and rushing toward the harsh, loud reality of the world. The last thing I felt from that place was a final, comforting whisper that echoed in my soul. You are not alone. Then, a jolt, like being struck by lightning, and a gasp of air, sharp and agonizing, filled my lungs for the first time. Again. Have you ever been given a second chance when you thought all was lost? Tell me your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because waking up in that hospital bed and seeing who was sitting in the chair next to me, that was the first test of my new mission. And you won't believe what happened next. The first thing I remember was pain. A sharp, searing pain that shot from the base of my skull through my entire body. It was a brutal, physical anchor, dragging me down from that golden peace and slamming me back into reality. The second thing was sound. The rhythmic, insistent beeping of a machine. The squeak of rubber-soled shoes on a linoleum floor. A muffled voice from far away. It was all too loud, too harsh. It felt like an assault after the perfect, harmonious silence I had just left. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they were sealed shut with lead. I managed a tiny groan, and the sound was foreign in my own throat, raw and broken. Instantly, I felt a hand on mine, small and warm and familiar. She's waking up! Nurse! The voice was choked with tears, but I knew it anywhere. My sister, Sarah. I forced my eyes open, and the fluorescent light of the hospital room was a physical blow, blinding me. I blinked, and the blurry shape slowly sharpened into Sarah's face, her eyes red and puffy, her expression a mix of terror and overwhelming relief. A doctor rushed in, a kind-faced man with tired eyes. He started asking me questions. Can you tell me your name? Do you know where you are? I tried to answer, but my tongue was thick, my lips numb. The words came out as a slurred mess. He told Sarah I had a severe concussion, that I'd had a terrible fall. A fall. He said my husband had found me, that he'd saved my life. My husband. The man who had knelt on the floor and watched the life leave my eyes. The first lie of my new life formed in my mind. A necessary shield. I just nodded. A tiny, painful movement. I couldn't speak the truth. Not yet. Who would believe me? But what happened next was even worse. A few hours later, my parents were there, crying and holding my hand. My mother looked at me, her face a wreck of worry, and said the words that made my blood run cold. He's been a wreck, sweetheart. He hasn't left this hospital. He blames himself for not getting that coffee table with the rounded edges you wanted. She said it with such sympathy for him. They saw a grieving, heroic husband. I saw the monster who was now playing the part of a saint. And here's the secret I had to keep locked behind my teeth. He wasn't just getting away with it. He was being praised for it. My family was comforting my murderer while I lay helpless in a hospital bed. The days that followed were a blur of pain and physical therapy. I had to learn how to do everything again. How to hold a fork. How to walk without the world spinning. My body was a broken cage, but for the first time, my spirit was free. The constant buzzing anxiety that had been my shadow for years was just gone. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I felt a strange, calm clarity. The woman who was scared of the sound of his keys in the door had died on that living room floor. The person who woke up in her place was someone new. Someone with a mission. One afternoon, Sarah helped me to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror, and I didn't recognize myself. Not because of the bruises or the stitches, but because of my eyes. The old fear was gone. In its place was a quiet, unshakable fire, the fire I had walked through. And I knew, with a certainty that came from that other place, that this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of his. Have you ever had to find strength in a moment when everyone saw you as a victim? I want to hear about it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because the story of how I planned my escape from that hospital, and the first time I saw his face again, is a story of a warrior being born from the ashes. That hospital room became my sanctuary. For weeks, it was my whole world. 4 white walls, the constant, steady beep of the monitor that was now my heartbeat, and the sterile smell of antiseptic that I came to associate with safety. My body was a roadmap of his rage, bruises that bloomed in ugly shades of purple and yellow, stitches that pulled at the back of my head. Every movement was a fresh reminder of the pain. But inside, where it mattered, I had never known such peace. The golden light I'd felt on the other side had left an ember glowing in my soul. The fear was gone. It had burned away in that fire, and what was left was something clean and hard and new. My parents would visit every day, their faces etched with worry. They'd bring me flowers that made the room smell a little less like a hospital and a little more like a funeral. They'd tell me how brave I was, and then they would talk about him. "He's just devastated," my mom would say, stroking my hand. "He calls every hour for an update. He feels so guilty about that table." Every word was a knife twisting in my gut. I had to lie there and listen to them praise my own murderer. I'd just nod, a small, tight smile on my face, because what could I say? The truth was too big, too monstrous. It would break them. So I held it inside me, a secret that felt like a hot coal in my chest. They were mourning the husband they thought he was, and I was mourning the parents I thought I had. My sister Sarah was different. She didn't talk about him much. She'd just sit with me for hours, reading a book or helping me with my food. One afternoon, she was brushing my hair, her touch so gentle. She looked at our reflection in the small mirror. "You're different," she said quietly. "Your eyes, the fear, it's gone." I just looked at her, and for a second, I almost told her everything. I wanted to crack open my chest and show her the whole, ugly, beautiful truth. But I couldn't. Not yet. Protecting her meant keeping her in the dark, just for a little while longer. I just squeezed her hand. "I guess some things have to die so other things can live," I whispered. She didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. The real change, the birth of my mission, happened late one night. I couldn't sleep. The pain meds made me foggy, but my mind was clearer than ever. I was flipping through channels on the small hospital TV when I stopped on a local news story. A young woman, not much older than me, was missing. They showed her picture, a smiling girl with bright, hopeful eyes. Her husband was giving an interview, crying, begging for her safe return. And I saw it. I saw the same emptiness in his eyes that I had seen in my husband's, the same performance. In that moment, the universe screamed at me. My story wasn't just my story. It was her story. It was the story of thousands of women whose screams were silent. The message from the other side came rushing back. Be a light. I finally understood what it meant. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about fighting back for all the ones who couldn't. My old life had been about making myself smaller, about disappearing. My new life would be about becoming impossible to ignore. I asked Sarah to bring me a notebook. In shaky handwriting, I started to plan. I wasn't a graphic designer anymore. I wasn't a wife. I was a warrior. I would use his money, the money from the perfect life he had given me, to build an army, a foundation, a place of refuge for women who needed a way out. I would build a lighthouse in the middle of the storm. I called it the Phoenix Project, because I knew what it felt like to be burned to ashes and to rise again. But what happened a few days later was my first real test. He came to see me. He walked into my room, holding a bouquet of my favorite roses, the ones I never got to see bloom. My parents and Sarah had just left. We were alone. He had practiced his expression in the mirror. He looked sad, remorseful, broken. He came to my bedside, ready to play the part of the devoted husband. He expected to see the same terrified woman he had left for dead on the floor. He leaned in close, his voice a soft whisper. "I'm so sorry, my love," he said, his eyes full of fake tears. He reached for my hand, but he didn't find a trembling victim. He found a woman who looked back at him without a trace of fear. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him, and for the first time, he saw the fire in my eyes. And in that moment, he knew. He knew the woman he had killed was gone, and someone else had come back in her place. Have you ever had a moment where you finally saw your own strength, and it terrified the person who tried to break you? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because my fight was just beginning. And the story of how I used his own perfect image to destroy him is one you need to hear. Looking him in the eye that day, seeing the flicker of fear on his face for the first time, that wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. I was taking back every piece of myself he had tried to erase. The man who thought he had all the power was suddenly powerless, because I was no longer playing his game. I had been to the other side of fear, and I came back with a light he could never extinguish. My death taught me something profound, a truth I carry with me every single day. We are all so much more than the worst thing that has ever happened to us. Our pain, our scars, the fires we are forced to walk through, they don't have to be the end of our story. They can be the beginning. They can be the very thing that forges us into the person we were always meant to be. The victim died on that floor, but the warrior who was born in her place, she was finally, truly alive. The life I live now isn't the perfect picture I used to post online. It's real. It's messy. And it's beautiful. I've learned that true love doesn't make you smaller. It gives you the space to grow. And the greatest love of all is the one that reminds you that you were always, and will always be, enough just as you are. If you are in the dark right now, if you feel like a ghost in your own life, please hear me. You are not alone, and your story is not over. My question for you is this: do you believe our deepest wounds can become our greatest purpose? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because my story is just one of many. I'll be sharing more stories of survival, of hope, and of finding the light in the darkest of places. You are not alone in this fight.